Hello, my reading is from the first half of the prologue from The Danger of Life, the second of my thrillers set in Scotland during World War II and published by Fledgling Press, and it looks like this. Stan had expected it to be easy. There had been no problems during practice on the ground in Norway. First you pulled the lever to open the hatch, then you dropped headfirst into the blackness below, while facing towards the rear of the Junkers Ju-88 bomber. That way you avoided being hit in the face by the blast of the slipstream. Then it was simply a nice, tranquil ride beneath your parachute down to an arrival in Scotland. Stan had spent the flight from Norway lying on his stomach, with the weight of his parachute, his radio, and his other supplies pressing down on his back. The aircraft's gunner was positioned just above him, while equipment and aircraft systems hemmed him in on both sides. This was no place for anyone suffering from claustrophobia. Stan was thankful that was not something that caused him a problem, especially not right now, when there were more important things to worry about. The main concern was the news over the radio that the diversionary air raid on Aberdeen, just to the south of them, had failed to find its target in the heavy cloud that had materialised in place of the forecast clear skies. The aircraft assigned to the raid were still looking for the city, but were unlikely to continue to do so for much longer. If they turned back, it would leave a single bomber flying steadily southwest at 3,000 metres, and looking very obvious to the British radar operators. The thought made Stan feel extremely vulnerable. It was no real surprise when the intercom suddenly came alive with shouted warnings of a night fighter. A member of the crew had reported he'd seen a silhouette of an aircraft hunting them through a hole in the cloud. The pilot took violent evasive action, and Stan found it was all he could do to avoid vomiting up the brandy he'd consumed before takeoff. A little later they emerged from cloud for long enough to catch a glimpse of the coast, which confirmed they were over Scotland. But it was obvious to Stan that no one on board the aircraft was certain which bit of coast they had crossed, or where they were in relation to his intended landing point. It was equally obvious that the crew was much more interested in evading the real or imaginary night fighter than they were in precision navigation. Stan had some sympathy for them. "Time for me to go, I think, Oberleutnant," said Stan over the intercom to the pilot. The gunner tapped him hard on the shoulder and gesticulated frantically. "No, wait, we need to connect to the static line first." Stan realised that he'd been on the point of dropping through the hatch without the line that automatically opened his parachute being attached. As the instructor had said gleefully on the parachute course, it's not the fall that kills you, it's the sudden stop at the bottom. Once the static line had been properly attached, Stan took a deep breath, and before he had time for second thoughts, he operated the hatch release lever, as he'd been shown in Norway. A bad night suddenly got much worse. Somehow he tumbled rather than dropped, and found himself wedged in the hatch in the floor of the aircraft upside down. Then Stan felt a Luftwaffe flying boot pressing down very firmly on his rear end, and suddenly he was falling free. The parachute opened while he was in cloud. Once clear of the cloud, he could see nothing in the darkness below him. He was beginning to consider the frightening possibility that they had been wrong about the coast and he had been dropped over the North Sea by mistake, when he caught a glimpse of what might have been a tree off to his right. He had barely braced when he landed heavily in a field, winding himself in the process. So far, so good, he thought, after recovering his breath and gathering his parachute. Now he just needed to find a telephone and a strong drink, though not necessarily in that order. Thanks.